Truth and facts you probably don't know. Billy Crudup's character, billed as the journalist in the credits, is meant to be Theodore H. White of Life magazine, who conducted a real-life interview with Jacqueline Kennedy. Director Pablo Larraín estimates that a third of the shots in the film were the first take. The project was announced with Darren Aronofsky as director, and starring Rachel Weisz as Jacqueline Kennedy. Both withdrew, but Aronofsky stayed on as a producer. Second music score for a feature film of music composer Mica Levi, whose first was for Under the Skin, 2013. Her third is for Marjorie Prime, 2017. First Pablo Larraín film to be shot in the United States of America. Filming moved swiftly over 23 days on stages in Paris, with 10 days in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. Screenwriter Noah Oppenheim has said, like so many women in history, Jacqueline Kennedy has never really gotten her proper due. She's been portrayed mainly for her style and elegance, but she deserves more credit for her exceptional understanding of image, public relations, and really creating the idea of Camelot after JFK's death. When I read about that single week in 1963, when she had to console two grief-stricken children, deal with moving out of what was really her only home, contemplate a whole different life moving forward, and at the same time had one last shot to solidify her husband's legacy, it was extraordinary. I couldn't imagine a more revealing moment to explore one of the most interesting women of the last century. The screenplay was on the blacklist of 2010. Premiered at the 2016 Venice Film Festival, where Noah Oppenheim won Best Screenplay. Director Pablo Larraín found the film's music score surprising. What I love about Mica, music composer Mica Levi, is that she understands that the image is one thing, sound is another and music is another, and they should not be the same. In order to create a fourth idea, she creates very emotional music which, when you put it with images, makes for something very unpredictable, full of both existential terror and beauty. To reenact the historic The Tour of the White House with Mrs. John F. Kennedy, director Pablo Larraín wanted to use vintage cameras to achieve a look that no longer exists. It was a big challenge to get that footage to look and feel exactly how it was, right down to the lighting. Color TV cameras then used a technology that separated the reds, blues, and greens and converted them into television signals, so they had a very distinctive period look. When I did the movie No. 2012, we used the same kind of technology, and I still had that camera at home, so I brought it to cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine to shoot the tour, and then we later treated it digitally. In September 2016, the film's director Pablo Larraín said, "We all know the story of John F. Kennedy's assassination, but what happens if we focus only on Jackie? What was it like during those next 3 days, drowning in grief? Her and her children's lives changed forever with the eyes of the entire world upon her. Jackie was a queen without a crown, who lost both her throne and her husband." Second consecutive film of 2016 that Greta Gerwig and Billy Crudup star in, the other being 20th Century Women, 2016. Chilean director Pablo Larraín had just one condition. He would only do it if Natalie Portman would agree to play Jacqueline Kennedy. Producer Darren Aronofsky agreed she was the sole choice. "You wonder if anyone could play Jackie. She is so iconic a figure," said Aronofsky. "But somehow Natalie makes you forget you are watching Natalie. Somehow through her magic and voodoo, she can disappear into any role." Although he aimed for authenticity, production designer Gene Rabas also allowed some expressionism. Pablo Larraín was always saying we shouldn't be afraid of color. "It is part of the spirit of Jackie," Rabas noted. Color also echoes Jackie's emotions. There's a scene when Jackie returns to the White House after the assassination and she's alone in the dining room. For that moment I really wanted to reinforce her understanding of what is coming, of what she has lost, and of the importance of it for the nation. So we really worked to develop a very specific palette and texture. There is no shine in that scene. Everything is brown, orange, or green. a combination that we thought evoked beauty but also profound sorrow. As he researched and wrote, Noah Oppenheim felt very strongly that he was writing a story not of the past, but about a woman who in many ways was the first in presidential history to forge the idea of leaving behind a visual legacy that lives forever. Jackie Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy's story speaks to us today for several reasons, said the film's screenwriter Noah Oppenheim. For one thing, it harkens back to a time when politics had a certain dignity to it, when we all admired the people who occupied the White House. I also think Jackie was sort of the first American queen, someone who showed us what it is to have the noblest grace under fire, and I think this is a time when people are desperately trying to cut through the fog surrounding what's true and what's not in our world, so it is the right time to explore how public figures craft their images and create mythologies around themselves. Producer Mickey Liddell said he was skeptical at first of cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine's plan to meld old and new footage. Stéphane and director Pablo Larraín, proved me wrong, he admitted. They found a way to do it seamlessly. There is a famous shot from the funeral procession, for instance, that is overlaid with the film, and it is integrated in a way I've never seen. They did it with the White House tour as well, to perfection. Producer Ari Handel summed up the costuming of star Natalie Portman to portray Jacqueline Kennedy. It was crucial to get Jackie's dresses right, and Madeleine, costume designer Madeleine Fontaine, not only did that, she made them feel alive and lived in. They feel so real, that it brings you into a new relationship with these iconic images we already know. We've all seen Jackie's pink suits, but when you see Natalie Portman take it off, you suddenly realize how this woman had spent an entire 24 hours in clothing soaked with her husband's blood. It's a visceral reminder of all she went through. Of a tour of the White House, 1962, hosted by Jacqueline Kennedy, director Pablo Larraín said, "When I saw the White House tour, I couldn't stop watching it. It said so much about Jackie and who she would become. I knew we had to add it to the film. She hadn't been on television before in that way, and it wasn't something she enjoyed, but Jack encouraged her to do it, in part because she'd been wrongly criticized for spending taxpayer dollars on the renovation, even though it was done with private funding. Yet, she was amazing, giving the tour in such a compelling way. Indeed, Jackie emphasized in her presentation that she felt the White House should not be thought of merely as the home and workplace of the president, but as a showcase for American history, art, culture, and a place of national pride." Director Pablo Larraín said of production designer Gene Rabas's work, "What Gene did in rebuilding the White House was amazing. I remember the first time that I walked onto the finished set, I was stunned. It was literally the same place you see in photographs. When Jacqueline Kennedy, did the restoration of the White House, she hired one particular French designer to do many of the fabrics. As soon as Gene got involved, he and our costume designer, Madeleine Fontaine, went to the companies who actually made those fabrics for Jackie Kennedy in the 60s. Some weren't even in existence anymore, but they found ways to remake everything so beautifully. It was a big challenge, but the feeling had to be exactly right." Music score composer Michael Levi keyed into the mood of the times with vintage instruments, and influences ranging from 1960s jazz masters John Coltrane and Morton Feldman as to the Lerner and Loewe stage musical of Camelot, and was later filmed. See Camelot, 1967, which Democrat President John F. Kennedy loved. On the computer I got together a group of instruments that I liked and seemed to be of the time: the vibraphone, flutes, strings, a bit of clarinet, some piano and percussion. Levi explained. Snare drums were also important, giving a military feel to some of it. It was the film's music score composer Michael Levi's plaintive refrain for Jacqueline Kennedy that becomes one of a piece with Natalie Portman's performance. For Jackie's theme, we used a glissando in the strings that has an uneasy, wailing pitch. It slightly distorts your comfortable idea of where the chord is because it's a triad. It's a familiar sound but also slightly warped by the crescendoing, Levi explained, and that seemed to echo something very real about what she was experiencing at that time. Noah Oppenheim, the film's screenwriter, cut his teeth in the world of news and politics, serving as senior vice president of NBC News, where he often talked about John F. Kennedy's impact with fellow journalist and JFK biographer Chris Matthews, and a senior producer of the Today, 1952. Oppenheim is also the co-author of the bestseller The Intellectual Devotional, American History, a compendium of wisdom from American historical figures. Naturally, he dove with relish into the research, poring through the endless archives amassed about the Kennedy family and the short-lived but endlessly influential administration. But research could only take him so far in his efforts to recreate the voice, personality and often obscured emotions of Jacqueline Kennedy. In the beginning, all that I knew about Jacqueline Kennedy, was really quite superficial, director Pablo Larraín noted. I knew her as the woman always seen in pictures next to JFK, John F. Kennedy, the woman known for her fashion, taste and style. I think that's how most people know her in America and around the world. But I wanted to change up that point of view and dig further. The more I looked, the more I found a woman who was very sophisticated, very smart and who had an incredible political sense of her own. Most importantly, she was a woman who understood communication in a way very few people did in those times. There was also an eerie moment that shook director Pablo Larraín when watching a tour of the White House, 1962, starring Jacqueline Kennedy. Suddenly, when Jackie is in the Lincoln bedroom, she starts to talk about what happened to Lincoln's widow after he was killed. The director recalled, in a very strange way, it almost feels like a premonition of what would happen to her. It seemed very important to me to include that moment, a sign of the weight she felt inside her. Director Pablo Larraín also wanted to make sure the film accurately showed that it was Jacqueline Kennedy who first connected Democratic President John F. Kennedy's Kennedy administration with Camelot, the mythical kingdom ruled by King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, which was based on the highest of human principles. I didn't really have a personal connection to the idea of Camelot until I explored more about it, said Larraín. I went back and listened to the words of the musical. When I got it, I was very moved, and I thought it was brilliant that Jackie was the one who linked that legend with her husband. Production designer Gene Rabas's sets, many painstakingly recreated from archival material, synced up with cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine's cinematography. Gene created these massive rooms and then Stéphane framed Natalie Portman playing Jacqueline Kennedy, in these long shots so that you feel her loneliness and despair. The White House sometimes feels like a maze she doesn't know how to get out of, producer Mickey Liddell said. Production designer Gene Rabas knew he had his work cut out for him. Everyone has seen the White House in movies and television, as recently as House of Cards, 2013. So that was daunting, especially since I'm a French designer who'd never been to Washington before. We wanted it to be very authentic, so we went through enormous amounts of documentation. We even found the blueprint of Jackie's 1962 renovations. The film's production designer Gene Rabas and his team thoroughly researched not only old footage but also the history of her famous televised White House tour, see A Tour of the White House, 1962, so that the sets could exactly replicate what audiences saw. I had an assistant who spent 2 months researching the name of every painting to find the height of each. It was amazing, the amount of research we had to do, but it was so important, Rabas noted. You had to see the beauty and splendor that Jacqueline Kennedy, so wanted to share through her tour. It proved impossible to shoot at the exact historic location on Elm Street near Dealey Plaza where John F. Kennedy was assassinated, as it is now a busy thoroughfare, and also a tourist attraction. Fittingly, the production found a location near the nation's capital to stand in, recalls producer Scott Franklin. We found a great stretch of highway in Maryland. It had similar overpasses and there we were able to put the camera on a crane attached to a car for a different point of view. Natalie Portman, was in the car the whole time. She did all of her own work that day, no stunt doubles, and we used all of it. It was a really tough and emotional day. We wanted to be true to the events yet also sensitive. Kennedy John F. Kennedy's death was truly violent and grisly, but I think director Pablo Larraín, did a great job of walking the line. He recreates it in a way that is almost lyrical and very respectful. For editor Sebastian Sepulveda, the music added whole new layers of feeling and inspiration. When we received some of Mica Levi's music, at first we were shocked. He recalled, "This is not the kind of score that we usually work with, but it was incredible and we were like kids in Candy Story playing with that score. The music is so tragic and beautiful, we were able to use it in really unique ways." As soon as director Pablo Larraín took on the film, he brought in his own original ideas of how to approach and film the picture. Larraín always saw the film as a multitude of Jacqueline Kennedy's innermost narratives, a series of moments and impressions that, like the fragments of a kaleidoscope, combined to create a more beautifully complex picture. He also envisioned an almost achingly intimate camera style, bringing a subjective rawness that has certainly never been seen in the White House setting before, a style that becomes part of Natalie Portman's both carefully calibrated and openly exposed performance as Jackie. Director Pablo Larraín was compelled by the idea of mixing and matching historic events that are well documented: the Dallas motorcade, Democratic Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson being sworn in to be the next American president on the Air Force One airplane, John F. Kennedy's grand state funeral, and final burial in Arlington National Cemetery beside an eternal flame, with the moments no one can ever document and can only be daringly imagined. Director Pablo Larraín with this film gives a boldly unconventional spin to the biopic genre, mixing historical footage with complete fictional recreations, and excavating just one critical moment in Jacqueline Kennedy's life, but in all its intricately woven layers. The first week after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy was a period of time, felt screenwriter Noah Oppenheim, that defined not only the icon Jacqueline Kennedy would become, but the beginnings of our image, saturated culture in ways that haven't really been explored. The blessing of writing about someone like Jackie is that there's an overwhelming amount of information about who she was, how she behaved, the timeline of her life, admitted screenwriter Noah Oppenheim. This preponderance of information about her life enabled me to root her in reality, but it also provided me an opportunity to ask questions and use my imagination to fully breathe life into her on the page. Because I had this wealth of research, I was free creatively and was able to dig deeper and explore her beyond the bounds of the facts I was able to ground her in. Producer Darren Aronofsky has said of his reaction to this film, "It was such an interesting project to undertake. I think it can be very important to recognize that even the icons we most look up to are actually human. It doesn't weaken them to explore not only their courage and strength but also their fears and self-doubts. I think, ultimately, that makes someone like Jacqueline Kennedy, even more real and more powerful." The real-life intimacy about Jacqueline Kennedy meant director Pablo Larraín felt he had to get to know the private Jackie in his own mind and heart. He realized, like most people, he knew little of who she was beyond the profuse imagery we've all seen of a charming first lady and stoic widow. He wanted to crack open her gilded image and look for starker truths. As he searched, he was more and more moved by Jackie's compassion, her care for not only for her children but for her husband's legacy and for the nation's battered psyche. Director Pablo Larraín became fascinated, and moved, by the way Jacqueline Kennedy allowed herself to become a kind of conduit for the public's collective feelings of anguish and doubt in the wake of the first presidential assassination of the 20th century, since Republican President William McKinley was assassinated at 4:07 p.m. on Friday, September 6, 1901. The United States never has had royalty, and yet in that moment, Jackie became like a queen without a throne, a mother to a nation in mourning, the director observed. She shouldered all their sorrow and pain even as she was enduring so much grief and shock herself. She put it all on her back and she pushed on. She couldn't have planned for these events, yet when the moment came, she carried herself with such grace and extraordinary love. During the turbulent week after the assassination of Democratic U.S. President John F. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy unwittingly built a reputation as someone as courageous and beloved as her husband, planning his funeral to become a strikingly grand national catharsis. That was not her intention, to make herself an icon, observed director Pablo Larraín, but in trying to protect her husband's legacy, she became one. There was a gap between her objective and the actual result, which is one of many things I found interesting to explore in this story. Today, Camelot is a title often used to refer to Democrat John F. Kennedy's entire tenure as President of the United States of America, but it was actually Jacqueline Kennedy who introduced the idea after JFK's death. Jackie's real-life interview with Life magazine inspired the real interview depicted in the film. In the interview, Jackie spoke of her husband's love of the 1960 Lerner and Loewe musical entitled Camelot, which was later filmed in the 1960s decade with Camelot, 1967, and especially the lyric, "Don't let it be forgot, that once there was a spot, for one brief shining moment, that was known as Camelot." That brief shining moment became a powerful descriptor of Kennedy's sudden loss that reverberated, said Jackie in the interview. "There will be great presidents again, but there will never be another Camelot." Producer Ari Handel agreed that this film breaks fresh ground, re-envisioning the biopic. He commented, "I'm hoping the film allows people to let go of some of their conceptions about what a biopic is and should be." Director Pablo Larraín, takes you on a different kind of trip, exploring a wider range of emotions. "This really was a difficult movie to cut because we had 4 different layers of time," commented director Pablo Larraín. "I would sometimes get pretty nervous. I would call Sebastian, editor Sebastian Sepulveda, and say, 'How are we going to put all of this together?' And he would keep telling me, 'Find emotional bridges.' That was Sepulveda's guiding notion." Natalie Portman as Jacqueline Kennedy's emotional journey became the thread of the structure. He explained, "The idea was to keep the audience so emotionally involved with her that you participate in her experience. You are in her mind, but it's a mind in grief, so time moves in fragments." One of Jacqueline Kennedy, Natalie Portman's most revealing relationships in the film is with Nancy Tuckerman, her social secretary in the White House but also her lifetime confidant. Taking the role of Jackie's friend since childhood and White House ally is Greta Gerwig. They two had worked together previously on No Strings Attached, 2011, so the bond between the characters never felt forced. Portman said, "Nancy was one of Jackie's oldest friends, so their relationship really shines a light on how Jackie feels about more private subjects, like her marriage and her kids. And Greta is such a unique actress. She's so bright and compelling and sensitive." Director Pablo Larraín added, "The connection between Natalie and Greta is so real as they are actually friends, and you can feel that." Greta brought an incredible sensibility to playing the only person who was Jackie's shoulder to cry on. She brought out something very beautiful. Unseen sides of Jacqueline Kennedy are also revealed in her interactions with her equally shattered brother-in-law, who was also the Attorney General of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy, an icon in his own right, who would be assassinated while running for president in 1968. The role is played by Peter Sarsgaard. Like Portman, Sarsgaard faced a gauntlet of trying to capture the essence of a man who is both beyond recognizable and revered. Sarsgaard admitted, "I was initially hesitant to play RFK. I wrestled with it, yet I couldn't get it out of my head. I admired him so much. I was already familiar with some of the moments of his life, and knew how he'd been completely poised in a moment of crisis. I wasn't really sure I could do it, and I said as much to Pablo." Director Pablo Larraín, "When we first talked, but Pablo gave me the confidence to try." Peter Sarsgaard observed that Bobby Kennedy, also known as Robert F. Kennedy, and Jackie Kennedy, also known as Jacqueline Kennedy, had differing points of view that could have divided them in a time of searing stress. "I think there was a bit of competitive grief between Jackie and Bobby as brother and sister-in-law. Jack was Bobby's blood, but Jackie was his wife, and she had a relationship with Jack that Bobby could never have. They probably wondered who had it worse. But what united them was the massive hole John F. Kennedy had left in their worlds. One of the things that struck me is that their grief is so fierce that I think that is what keeps the movie from ever being sentimental, Sarsgaard pointed out. Like Natalie Portman playing Jacqueline Kennedy, Peter Sarsgaard had to overcome the fact that he doesn't fully resemble Bobby Kennedy, also known as Robert F. Kennedy. A dental prosthesis brought Sarsgaard deeper into the character. Bobby has such a recognizable face. I was struggling with that, he recalled. Then director Pablo Larraín, said, "Why don't you add something simple, like Bobby's very prominent teeth for me?" It wasn't so much about copying his teeth but rather just having the sense of them. I didn't even wear them all the time because I always wanted it to be subtle enough that it wouldn't be something that you clued into. Natalie Portman explored the haunting territory of Jacqueline Kennedy, a woman juggling her incomprehensibly vast yet contained sorrow with a world watching, remembering and making meaning out of her every move. As First Lady, also known as FLOTUS, wife of American Democratic President John F. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy inspired millions of women worldwide with her effortless chic. Her signature style was at once classy yet modern, strong yet feminine, full of simple A-line dresses, color-splashed pillbox hats and prim, boxy Chanel suits, yet her alluring image also functioned as a kind of shield, dividing her constructed public persona from the person few outside her family saw. The look of the film had to work hand in hand with Natalie Portman's shifting internal states of mind as Jacqueline Kennedy. Director Pablo Larraín wanted the camera to purposefully enter into her most personal space. "To me, a film is always about texture and expressing emotion," said Larraín of the approach. "We ended up using a lot of handheld camera and building the sets so there could always be 360-degree movement, and most of the lights were hung from the ceiling so we had even more freedom. I wanted the feeling almost that we had snuck a camera behind closed doors, to create a fiction that offers a glimpse into what might have been Jackie's emotional state in these moments no one has seen." Cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine said that they tried to achieve this sneaky intimacy with their past in part by the careful use of 16mm film, which could be married with old newsreel footage. One of the story elements that the film focuses on is the real-life interview with the now-widow Jacqueline Kennedy by Theodore H. White for Life magazine at Hyannisport in Massachusetts, USA. Second of two theatrical feature film collaborations of actress Natalie Portman and Darren Aronofsky. The films are Jackie, 2016, and Black Swan, 2010, which both starred Portman, with Aronofsky working as a producer on Jackie, 2016, and directing Black Swan, 2010, the latter which Portman had previously won the Best Actress Academy Award Oscar for in 2011, around 5 years earlier. It was director Pablo Larraín's idea to incorporate into the narrative the 1962 television show, A Tour of the White House with Mrs. John F. Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy, c. A Tour of the White House, 1962, which was premiere broadcast on Valentine's Day, February 14, 1962, and seen by over 56 million viewers, taking unprecedented advantage of television's new golden age. Jackie had invited America and the world into the newly renovated White House in a way that was both public and personal, and in a way that seemed to form a bookend with her more somber public appearances after the death of Democrat President John F. Kennedy. The formidable task of dressing Natalie Portman in Jacqueline Kennedy's legendary outfits fell to French costume designer Madeleine Fontaine. One of her biggest challenges was recreating the inimitable strawberry pink Chanel suit and pink pillbox hat Jackie was wearing during the Dallas motorcade. A spookily confectionery outfit that would be forever seared into the minds of all who remembered that day. Hand-tailored for Jackie at the New York fashion house of Chez Ninon, the dress itself has become a Camelot leitmotif. Costume designer Madeleine Fontaine not only had to recreate Jacqueline Kennedy's famous dress with strawberry pink Chanel suit and pink pillbox hat, but she had to design it specifically for the film's close-up camera work and lighting. Fontaine said, "First we had to settle with director Pablo Larraín, and Stéphane, cinematographer Stéphane Fontaine, the right color for the different cameras they were used. We did camera tests of different colors to get the pink, and then we made 5 of them. It was truly impressive to see Natalie Portman, in the suit the first time on set," Fontaine said. "She took on the aura of Jackie." A challenge for costume designer Madeleine Fontaine was the dark red, two-piece, boucle wool dress Jacqueline Kennedy, Natalie Portman, wears during her White House tour that most people only associate with the grayed-out 1960s television image. There did in fact exist some photos of the dress in color, so we were able to see the original red, but we had to make 2 different pieces, one red and one pink, to get just the right shade of gray for the black and white television images, Fontaine explained. The film was entered and selected to screen in competition for the prestigious Golden Lion Award at the 73rd Venice International Film Festival in 2016, but lost out to L'Avdias Agbabing Humeo, 2016. Jacqueline Kennedy led a multifaceted life of power and influence, but when it came to writing about her, screenwriter and journalist Noah Oppenheim came to feel there was one story that spoke to her psyche in the most compelling way: the very brief but remarkably consequential days that the First Lady spent nearly alone in the White House following her husband's death. This film's result is an intimate portrait, yet one of epic themes, that provides a portrait of Jacqueline Kennedy as we've not seen her, a deeply human, vulnerable woman confronted at once with the power of loss, love, self-preservation, public consciousness and history. Star Natalie Portman, who portrays Jackie, also known as Jacqueline Kennedy, felt, "I think one of the many exciting things about working with director Pablo Larraín, was that he didn't have that sort of reverence that Americans have for the Kennedys," said Portman. "He was able to approach the film in a less orthodox way, and with intense, uninhibited feeling. He took the project in a completely unexpected and visionary direction." Most movie posters for the film feature Natalie Portman portraying Jacqueline Kennedy in a red dress standing in front of a red background. Red is a color associated with the Republican Party. Jackie's husband, American President John F. Kennedy, was a Democrat, whose party is associated with the color blue. When presidential elections are conducted, whoever wins the vote for each American state, the electoral map colors the relevant state red if it is won by the Republicans and blue if won by the Democrats. Scriptwriter Noah Oppenheim's intellectually probing yet starkly emotional script, so different from anything that had ever been penned about Jacqueline Kennedy, ended up on the famous blacklist of the best as yet unproduced screenplays and launched his screenwriting career. Spielberg courted the script for a while. Another filmmaker who was drawn to it was the iconoclastic and adventurous director Darren Aronofsky. At first, Aronofsky considered directing the film himself, but ultimately, it was Aronofsky who brought the picture to director Pablo Larraín and to actress Natalie Portman, with whom he'd had a highly creative rapport on Black Swan, 2010, with Aronofsky in the end coming aboard on Jackie, 2016, as a producer with his company, Protozoa Pictures. The film, about former First Lady of the USA Jacqueline Kennedy, widow of former Democratic American President John F. Kennedy, was made and first released in 2016, during the presidency of Democratic American President Barack Obama, debuting only about a month after the 2016 U.S. federal election, where Hillary Clinton, a former First Lady herself, had run as the first ever woman to be a presidential candidate for a major U.S. American political party, which was also the Democrats, as with JFK and Obama. Producer Darren Aronofsky was still mulling what direction to take the material when he saw Pablo Larraín's film El Club, 2015, a riveting drama set in a secret retirement home for troubled Catholic priests. It felt like fate. Larraín's distinctively energetic filmmaking style and deft ability to swirl character, emotion and political insight into an affecting narrative seemed a great match for screenwriter Noah Oppenheim's probing of Jacqueline Kennedy after the assassination of her husband President John F. Kennedy. El Club, 2015, was just a very impressive film. It was extremely moving, Yet it took you into a different world and introduced you to characters you never expected to empathize with, Aronofsky explained. After seeing it, I was convinced Pablo could probably do anything. The film's Jackie title refers to the nickname of the film's title character of Jacqueline Kennedy, who later became Jackie Onassis, her maiden name being Jacqueline Bouvier. Her final full name was Jacqueline Lee Kennedy Onassis. The film takes audiences on a personal journey into one of the most extraordinary events of American history, and also into a deeply stirring drama that illuminates in fascinating new ways the woman, the times and the ways we cope with and tell the stories of the most intensely public of tragedies. At the start of November 22, 1963, Jacqueline Kennedy was among the most famed, admired and envied figures in the world, as the elegant, stylish and alluring wife of the youngest ever elected president of the United States. She was also the First Lady of the televised age, photogenic, captivating and yet barely known beneath her near-mythical image of grace, youth and idealism. Jacqueline Kennedy's world, along with the faith of the nation, would be shaken from their foundations when John F. Kennedy was struck down by assassins' bullets while riding at Jackie's side in a motorcade parade through Dallas. In a moment rife with confusion and shock, the world witnessed the First Lady's composed grief in images that remain as poignant and mesmerizing as ever. But what no one saw is what went on behind closed doors in Jackie's private, tightly contained world. Suddenly alone, safe for her family, confidant and priest, the First Lady faced a remarkable series of challenges as a wife, a mother and a reluctant part of the political machine, consoling her young children, planning her husband's funeral, preparing for the next president, Lyndon B. Johnson, to rapidly move into the White House and most remarkably, fighting to maintain control over how history would forever define her husband's legacy. In a period of just a week, Jacqueline Kennedy, this fiercely private woman, had to face unthinkable personal loss, hard political realities, a nation in the throes of a collective trauma and, amid all the uncertainty, Washington machinery and public scrutiny, the responsibility of keeping alive all that her husband wanted to stand for in America. Though today he is among the most beloved of U.S. presidents, John F. Kennedy's legacy was hardly assured upon his death. He had spent just 2 years and 9 months in office, and the fear among those closest to him was that all he aimed for would be forgotten because the potential had gone unfulfilled. In the midst of her own anguish, Jackie steeled herself with a single-minded mission, to tell her husband's story in a way that it would always be remembered, as brief but shining moment of American promise. The fact that director Pablo Larraín is Chilean, a country with its own complicated and sometimes tragic political history, did not worry producer Darren Aronofsky. On the contrary, sometimes the most interesting stories are told by someone who can see with fresh eyes, Aronofsky noted. Also, Pablo has a rare ability to focus on characters who might not be easy to get close to, yet he makes you feel very deeply for them, and that is what made him such an interesting connection with Jacqueline Kennedy. Screenwriter Noah Oppenheim was immediately impressed by director Pablo Larraín. Working with Pablo has been an incredibly gratifying collaboration, Oppenheim stated. He brought a really unique point of view to the material and he challenged me to push further in terms of exploring Jacqueline Kennedy's humanity and the contradictory sides to her personality. The script just kept getting better and better as we worked together. As production moved forward, a skilled producing team joined with producer Darren Aronofsky. Aronofsky's longtime producers Ari Handel and Scott Franklin both joined in. Both were magnetized to the material. Franklin said, "This was such a different and refreshing take on a topic you think you've seen before. What drew me is the material being so personal and really about a woman's journey as opposed to the more typical perspective you get on historical events. And we knew that director Pablo Larraín, and star Natalie Portman, could peel back the layers and really bring you into that personal story in a way no one else could." Producer Mickey LaDillaBeldi Entertainment helped to make sure production ran smoothly so that director Pablo Larraín, the cast and production team crew could do their best work. It was truly a labor of love for Liddell, who came aboard with passion and said, "I got on the phone with Pablo, and we talked for a long time, and I decided that we wanted to be involved in it." We were literally finishing each other's sentences. I was excited about everything in the script that he was excited about. Also for me, it was the idea of doing a historical drama from a new perspective, revisiting something that you think you are already familiar with. I think Pablo was really fascinated with the story as a political one, and in his country a lot of things similar to this have happened.